The question is, are you ready?
What do you guys want to talk about?
Let me talk to you. Yeah.
Throwdown Nation, we are live with episode 71 of the Throwdown with Matt. It is a Thursday night. We are streaming on Instagram, YouTube, Twitter/X, Facebook, and Twitch. And tonight we are throwing down with a Florida-based wrestler, the Element Shane Evans. Shane is the newly crowned champion at Pro Wrestling Rebellion in Central Florida, and he has a long and storied history in the sport. How you doing tonight, Shane?
Oh man, I'm doing great. I appreciate you having me on.
Absolutely, man. You know, I've like I said before we went live, I've been looking forward to this.
Definitely.
And for those of y'all that are watching this live, if you have any questions or comments, throw them in the chat, and all questions and comments will be read and answered either as we go along or at the end. So we'll go ahead and get started with the first and most obvious question, and that is, how long have you been wrestling?
Well, that's a multifolded question, but wrestling professionally since 2006.
Okay. Who actually trained you?
So I got trained at a school that was called FXE out of Orlando, and it was led by Devon Dudley and Matt Bentley from TNA at the time. And this was before the Dudley boys had their own school. And then I actually did some additional training in 2009 with Tommy Taylor as well. But just to add a little caveat to that, I don't feel that anyone in this business is ever fully trained, and you're always looking for ways to get better.
Absolutely. You know, really with anything in life, if you quit learning, you stagnate.
Amen.
And you know, when you become stagnant, you die.
Yeah.
So how was it training under Devon?
Oh, Devon was a sweetheart. Now, Bubba, on the other hand, a couple times he showed up, that was a whole different story. I can give you just a quick story. One time, because a lot of times when some of the WWE guys they were close with were working in town, they might come by the school, and Brian Kendrick was there one night. And I actually wasn't even there the night Brian Kendrick was there, but apparently none of the students cleaned up afterwards. And Spanky himself was having to sweep up around the gym afterwards. And I guess Bubba caught wind of that. And he showed up the next day when I was there and decided to run chop class with everybody.
Nice.
So I had to take a beating for something I wasn't even a part of.
Wow. Yeah, that actually sounds like a Bubba thing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, but he did it with love, you know.
Well, yeah. I mean, you know, it's what do they call it? Tough love.
100%.
So, you were also telling me, you know, before we came on, about being gifted this psychology of the ring document at age 13. You know, tell us that story.
Yeah. So before I got professionally trained, me and some friends, like a lot of people were in that era, we were trying to do our own little backyard wrestling thing. But even from the get go, we weren't trying to do so much the hardcore stuff. We were trying to actually put on, real matches. We were trying to be as safe as we could, given what we knew or didn't know. But there was a local indie wrestler around here that I used to go to his shows, and we used to chat over AOL Instant Messenger. I'm dating myself a little bit. Remember that? But
Well, yeah. I mean, I grew up in the days of dial-up, so I
yeah,
mean,
my early days on the internet were dial up too.
yeah.
But yeah, he actually, for whatever reason, and I was a total mark, like little kid at that point. But for whatever
Hmm.
reason, he felt compelled to share a document with me that was put together by Chris Hero on the basic 7 steps of psychology in a match. And I remember reading it, and I was like, it clicked immediately. Like everything, the way it was explained, I was like, this is exactly what I've been watching on TV for years. And we printed it up. The friends that I, backyarded with, we started studying it, we started implementing it. And I think that was a huge early blessing in my early beginnings of getting into wrestling.
Gotcha. Do you still have the document?
I don't have the original document, unfortunately, because who knows what hard drive on what random desktop that's sitting in a closet somewhere that it might be on. Um,
But
but
you've
I kind
probably
of have,
got a version of it.
yeah, I've got my own like worded version of it that I've put together that I kind of will share with other people as well.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So, in the early days of your training, what would you say was the most challenging part? What was the most difficult aspect of professional wrestling to get your mind and your body wrapped around?
I would say, and this is me trying to answer it now, not necessarily the mindset that I had then, because obviously I've matured since then.
Right.
But just being able to really get myself physically conditioned. The bumps were whatever. It was something I adapted to quickly. Running the ropes was something I adapted to quickly. But to be good at wrestling, you have to wrestle. And when I say that, I mean you can do 30 minutes on the Stairmaster in intervals and sprints and all that. And that only carries over so much to being actually in ring conditioning. So just adapting to that ring conditioning. And I believe when I did it, it was like in the summertime here in Florida, and we were in a
Oh
warehouse
yeah,
building
that's brutal.
and no AC. And yeah,
Yeah, yeah. It's for um, it's been a good while now, but for a number of years, not terribly long ago, I trained in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu,
mm,
and that I still maintain to this day there is no better full body workout than rolling rounds of Jiu-Jitsu with somebody. I mean, it
oh,
is,
I believe it.
yeah. I mean, it's cardio, strength, and everything else, all wrapped up into one. And I imagine there's a lot of similarity, at least as far as the cardio and everything else with, what you guys do in pro wrestling training. So.
Definitely. Yeah, just I used to actually be really big into powerlifting, and a lot of
Mhm.
guys that I knew that got to the point where they couldn't continue to do it, that's what they actually transitioned to was BJJ.
Gotcha. Gotcha. So, also kind of focusing on the early portions of your training, what would you say was the most valuable lesson that you picked up early on? If you were going to impart something to a brand new trainee, what would be a nugget that you learned early on that you'd like to pass along?
I would say that you have to go into this loving it and being okay with the fact that you might not ever make it in this business.
Yeah, yeah. So we're going to try speed round.
Okay.
Sean Waltman.
Oh, I love X-Pac. Love him. Love every bit of his career. The match with Brett from the 90s, of course. His TNA run was great. I love X-Pac.
Yeah. Yeah, I liked the X-Pac and Six-Pac stuff, and even the 1-2-3 Kid stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's. I always felt like he never really got the credit he deserved. I always felt like he was a little underrated. I don't know if it was because of his size or what, but I just felt like he never quite got what he had coming.
Yeah, I would agree with that because he was pretty well rounded as a worker,
Mm-hmm. So I'm presuming that you've probably been a fan of this stuff the majority of your life. Would you say that's accurate?
Yeah, for as long as my memory pretty much goes back. Yeah.
Well, what would you say is your earliest wrestling related memory?
I remember, now I was born in 1988, but my earliest memory is like sitting next to my grandpa, and I remember like the Mega Powers in the early 90s.
Oh yeah.
Remember seeing them, but what really, really kind of drew me into it was the video games on Nintendo 64.
Mm-hmm.
Specifically the first one, WCW NWO World Tour, and that was what got me like fully bought into wrestling.
Gotcha. Well, was there a particular point that you can remember where you really sort of turned your mindset to thinking, I think I could do this?
Oh, when I started playing that video game, it was on. It was on.
So the video game actually triggered you into thinking, I want to actually do this.
Yeah, yeah, and that was peak, Monday Night Wars, Attitude Era, WCW,
Right.
NWO. So everybody that was around me, in school, things like that. All the kids were into it, so it was very easy to want to gather people together and attempt to do it. Whether it had been in throwing a mattress on the floor in the living room or playing around on the trampoline. The "Don't try this at home" videos. We tried it at home.
Yeah. Well, of course. I mean, you have
Right.
to. I mean,
You have to.
uh,
Fortunately,
it,
never
it's
got hurt, but
yeah. It's kind of a rite of passage, though. I mean, if you're a kid and a wrestling fan, you're gonna try it at home. I mean, so.
and there's plenty of pros out there that did too. The Hardys,
Oh yeah.
Mick
Yep.
Foley. So I'm not the first, won't be the last.
Nope. So, away from wrestling, what are some of your other hobbies and interests?
I love spending time with my family. Most importantly, I'm really big into. Well, I was really big into powerlifting. That was kind of what I did in my time away from wrestling, and I'm sure we'll get into that later. But just overall, going to the gym, health and fitness, and then of course, I'm a big football fan.
Who are your teams?
I like the Florida Gators, and I also love the Denver Broncos. Unfortunately, they just got knocked out of the playoffs, but it was nice to see them in there for the first time in 10 years.
Gotcha. Yeah, I'm up here about 35 miles northeast of Atlanta, but I'm not a Georgia Bulldogs fan at all.
Okay.
I was actually kind of raised to hate Georgia, even though I live here. But I'm a University of Alabama fan by marriage. My wife's a Bama graduate, so I've got a soft spot for Bama, and then as far as the pros go, I like the Cincinnati Bengals and the Philadelphia Eagles. So,
Oh, yeah. Well, Chris will like that because he loves the Eagles.
Yeah. I'm mostly an Eagles fan because of Jalen Hurts. He
Okay.
was a Bama,
Alabama,
guy,
right.
and I just kind of sort of followed him. And then the main reason for me with the Bengals is I dig Joe Burrow's attitude. I'm a quarterbacks guy. So.
Oh yeah, Joe Burrow is he's probably the closest thing physically to a Tom Brady type that we have right now.
Agreed. Yeah, I think he's got a very bright future ahead of him. So I'm excited to see it play out. So just sort of digging into pop culture a little bit. Are you watching or listening to anything cool right now?
Man, not really, man. I work so much that by the time I get home and then catch up on all my text messages and group, 6 or 7 group chats I'm in, I probably spend more time doing that than anything. But to be honest, I haven't really listened to any new music or watched any new TV shows or movies in a couple years. All my friends call me a square.
Gotcha, gotcha. Yeah, I mean, I don't have time to watch much, but I'm always looking for recommendations. So, but so are you originally from Florida?
Yep, I was born and raised in DeLand, Florida. Random fact about this town and the high school I went to, but Nancy Benoit, or whatever her maiden name is, I don't want to disrespect her like that, but she actually went there.
Oh, interesting, interesting. Yeah, I've said this on several other episodes of this. I'm a huge Chris Benoit fan, and I can separate his resume and body of work from how he ended up. But he is still actually on my Mount Rushmore
Oh
of.
yeah,
I
oh yeah,
mean, you can't dismiss the in-ring work and the career the guy had. I
no,
mean,
you can't.
he was phenomenal, and it was just a complete tragedy. So
Yep, it really was. Yeah, he was one of my favorites as well, and I still love his work. I go through different phases with it mentally, where and emotionally, where when it's hard for me to watch it, kind of knowing. But then they
right,
put these documentaries out that kind of, I don't want to say make light of them, but kind of humanize the situation. Well, CT, and it is true. Like you can't deny it. Um, but I'm in a good place with him right now, where I can watch his work and appreciate it.
got you. So so what is your favorite thing about Deland?
My favorite thing about DeLand is that it's a smaller town. It's only about 45, 50,000 people, but it's 20 minutes west of Daytona Beach, and
Mhm.
then 20 minutes, or I'm sorry, about 30 minutes northeast of Orlando. So it's a small town that has everything you need, but I'm not a big city person, so it's close enough to the bigger cities that if I want to go there, I can, but I don't have to live in it.
Gotcha. Yeah, as a kid, I lived in Central Florida for about 7 years. I lived in Satellite Beach near Cocoa and Melbourne,
Okay.
um, and and that was actually the point in my life where my wrestling fandom started. And so as a kid, I kind of started out with Florida Championship Wrestling with Gordon Soley as the
Solely, yep.
commentator. Yeah, back in the day. And the first feud I remember watching was Dusty Rhodes and Kevin Sullivan. Back when Sullivan had the whole satanic gimmick going
Hmm.
on, and it was when you're 11 years old, man. Kevin Sullivan was a scary dude. I mean,
He was.
yeah, yeah,
He's
because
another guy who doesn't get enough credit, honestly.
I agree. I agree. Yeah. I was actually really sad to hear of his passing not too long ago,
Yeah.
because yeah, he was one of the good ones for sure. So let's try speed round again.
Okay.
Christopher Daniels.
Oh, Fallen Angel. Haven't
Yeah.
kept up with as much of his later half of his career. I know I saw some stuff he was doing in AEW with Kazarian, and I was like, this guy's still pretty good for 50 years old.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
but obviously his ROH run, his TNA run, the three-way matches he had with AJ and Joe, those were legendary, phenomenal worker. Never felt like he was I, his work was main event level, but I never felt like he necessarily had the promo skills to be a main event guy. It's definitely somebody
Right.
that could have, benefited from being paired up with a mouthpiece. And he
Yeah.
wasn't necessarily a bad promo, just not someone that stood out above the rest.
Right. Right. But yeah, I mean, I agree. It's interesting that he can still operate at a pretty high level for being a guy, right at, if not into his 50s. As a matter of fact, this Saturday night on AEW Collision, of all things, he's got a Texas death match with Hangman Adam Page. I don't know if you're familiar with him at all.
Yeah, I
But
am. I am.
but yeah. So he and Hangman have a Texas death match. So
That's crazy.
I think I'll probably check that out just to kind of see how it goes. You know?
You got me wanting to check it out, honestly.
Yeah. So they say that the best wrestling personas are kind of yourself turned up to 11. So tell me a bit about in-ring Shane. Tell me about the Element and kind of compare and contrast him with everyday you.
So I think it definitely kind of follows the path of my life. So right now I'm on a babyface run, and really this is the first time that that's ever even happened. But I'm at a place in my life where I'm doing a lot better than I used to. I definitely went through a pretty rough patch in life, and I think that kind of projected out in my wrestling because that was my art. Um, I'll probably catch some flack from this, but anybody who's been around me knows this. And then by no means am I saying I'm better than this individual, but I kind of did something similar to what MJF does, gimmick and character wise, before he was
Mm-hmm.
ever even thought of being a wrestler. Not saying I'm better than him because I'm not even close. But very similar to that. And that kind of reflected who I was at that time. Fortunately, I've turned my life around, gotten away from some of the bad things I was involved in, and this run has kind of come organically as me being a babyface, which means when the heel turn does come, it's going to be all the better.
Gotcha. Well, as far as MJF goes, you might be better than him, and he knows it.
He might have been watching those YouTube videos of me on his way up.
Who knows? Who knows? I was actually talking about MJF with my guest last night, and it's been interesting because I mean, he came in as just an amazing talker. His in-ring stuff was so, but he has actually really put in the work to where his in-ring stuff has gotten really good.
Oh
Um,
yeah, I did see
and
the Iron Man he had with Brian, and that was phenomenal.
yeah, yeah. I mean, and I love it when people who are really good in one aspect are actually willing to put in the work and get good in the other. Like, on the opposite extreme, there was Will Ospreay, who was just insanely good in the ring, but not much of a talker. But now, I mean, the guy is well rounded as all get out. And I just love to see that, the growth of the artist.
Definitely.
So it's probably been a while, so you may not remember all the details, but tell us a bit about your very first match. What was it like? How did it go? What were your thoughts going in, your thoughts coming out, all that stuff?
My very first match in a ring was in Pennsylvania, and it was a
Okay.
6-man elimination match. And the other 5 that were in it with me were all just as equally as much of a greenhorn as I was. It was primarily me and another guy, a good friend of mine, Lee Andrews from Texas. We pretty much kind of ran the match. We had built some rapport with each other online through instant messenger and internet forums back then. Um, but yeah, I don't think I was really nervous about it. I was more nervous about it being the first time me actually having a match in a ring. But like having the match in front of a crowd, in front of all my peers, like that didn't bother me.
Got you. So, having heard about the first match, now tell us about your favorite match that you've been a part of.
That's a hard question to answer. Um, there's a guy down here who goes by the Chad, and we actually met each other at TNA in Orlando when they were running out of the Impact Zone back in 2006.
Hmm.
And we were both just getting into our training at that time, and we kind of came up together at that time. Um, he's went out and started to make somewhat of a name for himself, but we've had several matches. The best one being we had a 30-minute Ironman match. We actually had 3 of them, but All of them were great, but the first one was top notch.
Gotcha. Speed round. Jonathan Gresham.
That's one I couldn't tell you anything about.
Okay, that's fine.
As sad as this is to say, I couldn't even tell you what promotion he's in.
He's actually in TNA right now.
Okay.
So, Shane Helms.
Oh, I love the Hurricane. I remember him in 3 Count at the end of WCW. Obviously, the
Yep.
Hurricane gimmick, the feud he had with The Rock. I popped really hard when he came back at, I think it was Royal Rumble 2018, I want to say, when he made that return. Yeah, Shane Helms rules. Would never want to take the Vertebreaker, but Shane Helms rules.
No. You know, the Vertebreaker has always been a move that just terrifies me to watch because it just looks like an absolute recipe for disaster. I mean, there are just so many ways that move could go wrong. I mean, and catastrophically wrong, not just wrong. Um,
Yeah, in my experience, there's just certain guys who are built to take bumps like that. They have the torso length and they have the mobility and the neck strength, and even with them, it could still go wrong. But there are certain guys who just seem to be able to take those kind of bumps and it not phase them. I'm not one of those guys, but there are guys out there I've seen that can take bump after bump like that and just keep going for 15, 20 years straight.
Gotcha. So, what is the longest distance you have ever driven to get to a match?
Are we saying driven specifically or traveled in general?
Well, traveled in general, that's fine.
Okay. Driven to Kentucky, flown all the way up to Pennsylvania. And I don't know if that's really too much of a difference from where I'm at, but that's about as far as I've went.
Gotcha. So, and I know everybody has them, but what would you say is your biggest in-ring pet peeve?
Are we talking about others or stuff that I do myself?
Both.
My biggest in-ring pet peeve that I see others do is a lot of people just don't work the crowd. I don't see audience work, and every audience is different. So how you work one style of crowd doesn't necessarily work for another. But a lot of guys on the smaller scale indie shows, because they're still trying to figure it out, and I'm still trying to figure it out. Everybody is, but a lot of them are thinking what the next move and the next spot is, that they don't take that time to just kind of slow down and let the crowd digest it for a bit, let them react to it, and then pivot from there.
Gotcha. Well, like I said before we went on the air, the last couple of days I've kind of gone down the rabbit hole, with Shane Evans a bit, and I found some of your old backyard matches, and I was watching one earlier today where there was actually a bump onto a flat screen TV. and,
Oh yeah.
um, I mean, the energy of the match was actually pretty cool. It looked like you guys were really having fun, but you've come a long way.
Yeah, so it's funny that you bring that one up, because now that match kind of contradicts what I said before, that we weren't trying to do hardcore stuff. But it's funny because by that point, I actually had been formally trained, and that was specifically a death match tournament that we were doing. I'll probably never do a death match again for the rest of my life, but at that point in time, it sounded like a good idea.
Yeah, yeah. You know, I can watch and appreciate death matches, but they're not really my cup of tea. I'll watch one, but I don't go out looking for them necessarily. But
Right.
but there definitely is an art to doing them effectively and as safely as you can in that kind of environment. And you know, And the fact that these people can do these death matches and come out not necessarily unscathed, but without serious injury is really kind of a testament to their skill.
Yeah. I'll tell you the wildest death match spot I've ever seen, and maybe for some people this wouldn't be, but there was one I seen. They pull out the staple gun sometimes.
Oh yeah.
A guy literally stapled a dollar bill to another guy's ball sack, and I was like,
Oh no.
why would you do that? Like,
Wow. That's unreal.
like
I mean,
I'm not gonna ever death match again, but if I
mm-mm.
were to, light tubes, okay, whatever. Maybe get a cut, maybe you got to get some stitches. Barbed wire, yeah, it sucks. Thumbtacks, those aren't that bad, but that, no, I'm good.
Yeah, one of the worst looking thumbtack spots I ever saw, and I just ran across this on YouTube. You know, bunch of thumbtacks get dumped out in the ring, and a guy ends up coming down barefoot right into the thumbtacks. And I mean, and they do like a zoom in on the guy's feet, and his feet are almost like nothing but thumbtacks.
Mm.
It just looked awful because the bottoms of your feet are pretty sensitive. I just couldn't imagine. I mean,
I've seen a guy get DDT'd in the thumbtacks, and the whole top of his head was covered in them.
wow.
You actually might know this guy, Alex Zane.
Oh yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah. Yeah. The sauce, isn't it?
Yep, the sauce.
Wow. Well, that actually is kind of a perfect segue to our next speed round name, Nick Gage.
Controversial.
For sure.
I have a checkered past as well, not quite like his, but I can appreciate someone who was able to get away from that and get it together and make a living for themselves. I'm not the biggest fan of his style of wrestling, but I can appreciate what he does, and I can see the appeal behind it for those who are into it.
Yeah. So, I know that there are two primary ways of kind of preparing for a match. You can either work it out with your opponent in the back, or you can call it in the ring, or kind of do a little bit of a hybrid of both. Do you have a preference?
So I love this question. When you sent it over to me, this was the one I was looking forward to answering the most. My preference in a perfect world would be able to call it in the ring.
Right.
And I think that would be everybody's. But in today's business and the way it works, I don't know that that's feasible. At the bare minimum, I think you at least have to convey with who you're working, at least the type of story you're trying to tell, maybe some key moments and a finish. You do have those situations, and I'll use this as an example, like Rock Hogan, WrestleMania 18. They switched up who was the heel and who was the babyface mid-match, but we're talking about two all-time greats doing that out in the ring in front of however many tens of thousands of people that was. It depends who you're working. If I'm working someone who's a vet, they're more old school, they got a more simplistic style and move set, we're having a kind of a more simple style match, I'm perfectly comfortable calling it in the ring. But if I'm working someone who is a little faster paced, I know they like to do a lot of flips, arm drags, things like that. You just have to coordinate that. I've heard some people say they don't like over planning because if something doesn't go right, it can mess up the whole flow of the match. But I also feel like that could be the same could be said for calling it in the ring. If you mess up something there, you got to just keep it moving. So you plan something, it doesn't go, it is what it is. You keep it moving.
Absolutely. And your example there of Hogan Rock, that was really a brilliant example of guys being able to read the crowd and be able to basically shift on the fly.
Yeah,
That was pretty neat.
definitely.
So, I don't know if this is something that you have encountered, but I'll ask it anyway. if you've worked in any other countries or cultures, how have you or would you handle language barriers when interacting with fans or working with the talent?
I've never worked in another country. I would love to be blessed with that opportunity one day. But if I was faced with that situation, I'd be looking for a translator
Yeah. Yeah.
or, doing my best to learn the language. Like a lot of those guys in the 90s that were in Japan did, Jericho, Benoit, Eddie, those guys.
Yeah. Or Kenny Omega. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. I mean, Kenny Omega spent a long enough period of time over there that he basically became fluent. He can speak Japanese as well as he can speak English now. So
Yeah. I think you just, in a situation like that, humans are humans and we're not culture, not country, all that. We're not all that much different from one another.
no,
I think you kind of got to go into an environment like that and be more quiet and observant and kind of figure out how things go in that
right,
area. And then you
right,
got to, learn and grow and adapt to that.
right. Well, having asked this, to a lot of my other guests, one other prevailing sentiment is that wrestling is kind of a universal language in and of itself, and you can kind of, if you're dealing with somebody that you don't speak their language, they don't speak yours, you can oftentimes kind of pantomime a bit and they'll at least understand kind of what you're trying to get at.
Oh yeah. And at the very
So,
least, if they still don't know what you're saying, we got the internet and you pull out a video and you show it to them and they'll get the idea of what you're trying to do real quick. As far
right.
as communicating with another wrestler goes, fans, that might be a little murkier,
Yeah,
but
right. So if you could only be one, would you rather be great in the ring or great on the mic?
so this was my second most forward-looking to question that you put. Um, for me, it's being better on the mic. Now, if you would have asked me 15 years ago, I would have said in the ring. But you look at a lot of these guys, and the ones that stand out the most and stand the test of time, they all had the mic skills, and a lot of them were able to have longevity with their careers by, maybe they couldn't quite go in the ring like they once did. Like maybe you watch a Ric Flair match in 2007. Was he what he was in 1985? Of course not, but he
No.
still was great and he had the mic skills to do it. Um, some people will say that the in-ring skills are more important, and I'm not saying they're not important. You got to be competent in the ring, no doubt. But a lot of people will say, "Oh, well, you can pair me up with a mouthpiece." And for some people that works. Paul Heyman, they paired him up with Brock Lesnar in the early days before Brock was comfortable on the mic. But that's a freak specimen that anybody's going to believe no matter what. And for everyone like that, you have a Cesaro who got paired up with Heyman and it didn't quite go over. And I love Cesaro or Claudio, whatever you want to call him.
Yeah,
But yeah, I think the persona and the character outweigh the wrestling skills, at least here in America, anyways.
absolutely. Speed round. Kurt Angle.
Oh, like my all-time favorite. Love Kurt Angle. Yeah, that's legitimately my all-time favorite wrestler. I think he's the most well-rounded performer to ever do it. Some people will say Shawn Michaels. Kurt could do it in the ring. He could be a goofball. He could be serious. He was great on the mic. He could work with anybody and get the best match out of them. Yeah, I love Kurt.
So, what has been the most unusual encounter you have had with a fan?
Yeah, when I saw this question, I had to think about it a little bit because I don't know that I've ever really had an unusual encounter with a fan, unless we're talking about like ring rats. But my wife
Well,
might be
no,
watching, so I don't want to go
no.
down that rabbit hole. And I never really entertained those, but I've definitely had
Yeah,
some be a little crazy. But yeah, I don't think I've really ever had like an unusual encounter with a fan.
gotcha. So, do you have a preference yourself between working heel or baby?
I've always preferred being a heel because it was just kind of naturally who I was. And there will come a day that I would love to go back down that path. But I'm really enjoying being a baby face right now. It's a lot of fun, a lot more fun than I thought it would be.
Yeah, yeah. As a fan, I've always found myself gravitating more toward the heels.
Oh yeah,
Uh,
same.
Simply because, I mean, for the most part, they're more compelling characters. Um, you know, the thing about the heel is there's usually a backstory. There's usually a reason why they are the way they are. They're usually not being an asshole just to be an asshole. There's a reason. And, getting into the psychology and the backstory of it all, I just find that fascinating. Whereas, I mean, there usually isn't as much backstory to the babyface. They're just, especially like the white meat babyface.
Right.
But I mean, something that I've found really interesting lately is, Cody Rhodes is on this huge babyface run right now, but they're starting to put some little breadcrumbs and some little Easter eggs into his character, and I see a heel turn coming for Cody possibly sooner than later. And I'm intrigued by that. I'm excited to see, he's done the heel thing before, but I'm excited to see what he can do as a heel
At this level that he's
at
at.
this level. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And I definitely, and I've noticed even several months ago, the crowd is starting to slowly turn on him a little bit. They're sort of over the whole shtick.
Well,
I
when
think.
it comes to a babyface being the champion, the money's in the chase. Once they
Right,
get it, it's kind of like, well, what do we do now? Even if you look at like Stone Cold, he never really had like a long, crazy title reign. Now he was
right,
derailed with injuries, of course. But outside of him, I think he might have been one of the only ones that was able to maintain that babyface popularity um, because he was constantly chasing.
right, right,
But you can only do that angle with so many guys. You can't do the constant screw over the baby faces. You know what I mean? That only works with so many people.
right. So, and I know this happens a lot more than any of us, completely realize. But can you share an example of a time where during a match something went completely sideways and you had to really and truly improvise?
Yeah, so I can tell you about my most recent match when I won this.
Okay.
I was working Tiberius, and we had a routine spot where he was going to give me an arm wringer, and I was supposed to just face bump down.
Mm-hmm.
I overshot, and I scorpion bumped it on my neck. Pretty certain I
Mm,
also had a mild concussion. Um, I blanked out and don't really remember anything for about a 10-minute window. I just remember like standing up after it was over, and I could barely even hold the belt up. And the ref was like, "Yo, get people out here." He thought I was going to fall over. I wasn't quite that bad, but yeah, at that point, I said I was hurt, and the ref wanted to call it right then and there. And I said, "No, we have to finish the match." And me and Tiberius communicated with one another. I'm totally breaking kayfabe here, but we communicated one another, and we were able to at least get to the end.
got you. Got you. So, in terms of your in-ring work and your promos, who would you say are some of your influences?
Kurt Angle, like I said earlier, Samoa Joe is another huge one. I actually even use the Muscle Buster from time to time. I actually, in my early days, I used to even wear the split biker shorts like he did.
Really?
Oh yeah, yeah. Shawn Michaels is fantastic. I love Brett. I love Punk. I like those kind of well-rounded guys. But if I had to really pick one, it's Joe.
Hmm. You know, it's funny. The irony is not lost on me that the two main guys from Degeneration X are now running WWE. Hunter and Sean. I mean, um, and it's been interesting watching watching the two of them mature into the roles that they currently hold. You know, they are both doing phenomenal work. I mean, and back in the day, you know, you
would have never
wouldn't have
guessed
thought it.
it.
You wouldn't have thought it. I mean, because they were such backstage politicians at the time, and you know, I mean, to me, and I was even talking about this to my guest last night. The turning point of the maturity of Hunter and Sean was WrestleMania 20 when they were in the three-way with Benoit. You know,
One of my favorite
because
matches.
that was the first time that they had matured to the point where they would put somebody over that wasn't in their little clique. You know, for what was best for business at that time. And, you know, I feel like that was really a turning point for those two men. So,
Yeah, I agree. And Triple H, I think, gets a bad rap. A lot of people say, oh, he buried talent. But I think if you look at his WrestleMania record, I'm pretty sure he lost more than he won.
he probably did.
I could be wrong, but he's lost quite a few big matches there. So
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
and him winning all those other matches throughout the year made him losing that match to whoever he was putting over that much more impactful, I feel like.
Absolutely. So, do you have an all-time favorite match as a fan? A match that you can have watched it a million times and it just never gets old, and there's always some new little nugget you can pull from it.
I got a few, but my all-time 100% favorite match, I've even shown it to people who weren't fans of wrestling at all, and they loved it. But Samoa Joe Kenta Kobashi from Ring of Honor in 2005.
Oh yeah, yeah. That is a thing of beauty.
It's fantastic. The whole thing, start to finish, I'm compelled from the get-go with it.
You know, Joe's match with Necro Butcher was pretty good too. Just as far as just intense and violent. I mean,
Oh yeah, oh yeah.
yeah. You know, another match that I consistently recommend to folks is from back in '89. There was an I Quit match at a Clash of the Champions between Ric Flair and Terry Funk.
Oh, I would definitely give that a watch. I've never seen it.
Look for it. It's probably out on YouTube somewhere. It is a master class in storytelling. It is phenomenally good. So yeah, that's your homework.
Okay.
Find that match and watch it and report back. I
Okay.
mean,
Yeah, I will.
you'll thank me later. It is great. So and this can be present day or past. You know, who would be a dream opponent for you? Who would you love to work?
As much as I love Joe, I would not want to work him because he would eat me alive. Um, Probably most all-around guy that if I could get a chance to work with, it would probably be Punk.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to get destroyed by him on the mic, and I love the way he works. I love his style. It's very similar to Brett's in the sense of it's kept simple, but it's about making it look good and believable.
Right, right. So let's see here. Okay, we're gonna try another speed round name here. Jack Perry.
Uh, Great athlete, obviously immature,
Yeah,
and
extremely.
extremely. But I do like that he leaned into being a heel after the whole Punk debacle. I thought that was a good move on his part to do that.
Yeah,
It was him being self-aware, so that showed some maturity in its own way there. Tremendous talent. Probably needs to eat a little more and hit the gym a little more. That's just me being old school and thinking that guys should have a build.
yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of my take on him.
Got you. Got you. So, what is your favorite move? What is something that you just love to do And on the flip side, is there a move that you won't do, or at least you would rather not do, and that can be giving or receiving?
So my favorite move would be my finisher, which is the lariat. You can do it to anybody, and depending on how they bump it, or even in situations where, let's say, I'm working a really big guy, there's ways to still make it look just as good, and that's why it's my finisher. It's my favorite move. Um, Moves that I don't want to do and don't really want to take. We already talked about the vertebreaker earlier, but
Yeah.
I'm not a fan of the Canadian Destroyer. I can take them, and I'm not saying that I wouldn't, but it's probably one of the most overused moves today, and it's no
Yeah.
longer really valued as a devastating finisher like it was when Petey Williams was doing it almost 20 years ago.
Right. Right. Something else I've spoken about in several of these. I am a huge mark for Jake Roberts, and I hate seeing the DDT being relegated to a mid-match setup move as opposed to a finisher, because I mean, when Jake Roberts would give a DDT, you would thought he'd kill the man. I mean,
Well, have you ever heard his take on that?
no, I have. I don't know that I have.
He was interviewed not too terribly long ago, and they asked him what he thought about people doing it as a regular move now, and he said, "Well, if nobody kicks out of it when I do it, that means I'm the best one to do it."
Well, that's true. That's true. Yeah, I mean, I guess that's definitely one way of looking at it. But I don't know. I just hate seeing it being sort of relegated to just another move. I mean,
No, I agree. It's like that with a lot of moves. Super kicks are overdone, cutters are overdone.
yeah.
I remember not so much recently, but are you familiar with the lung blower? Or
Oh
Carlito did
yeah.
it, and it was called the
Yeah.
backstabber. That was a
Yeah.
very common mid-match move, like in the mid to late 2000s.
Yeah.
So I think that's just wrestling and how it goes. And I don't agree with it either or like it, but it is what it is.
Yep. So you've been doing this long enough that I'm sure this applies. What hurts right now?
Other than, well, it's funny because I actually experienced more injuries from powerlifting than I did from wrestling. Other
Hmm.
than me breaking my nose, I never got injured wrestling, like actually injured. Yeah, I tweaked my neck a little bit in this last match, and I've had some mild concussions. Um, I was in a car accident almost 2 years ago now, and I broke my arm really, really bad. I don't know how well you can see the scars on it,
Oh yeah. Yeah. I see
but
it.
it's fused together. So I actually don't like see how I'm rotating like this. I actually
Hmm.
don't have the ability to do that with this arm. I can extend it, but I don't have the ability to rotate it because it's fused together.
Mm.
Um, Fortunately, I don't have any pain in it, and it is something I have to work around when I plan a match with somebody. Um, but no, other than just some tight shoulders from having torn a couple rotator cuffs lifting weights, I don't experience a whole lot of pain.
Well, that's a good thing. I mean,
It
because
is.
yeah.
It
So
definitely
what?
is.
So what is your take on the role that social media is playing as a promotional tool in wrestling?
Oh, I think it's great. Um, it's an easy way to get out there with everybody. Now, does everybody use it properly? Absolutely not. There's definitely those who probably should have a PR person before they post some of the stuff they post. Um,
Right.
People getting emotional and letting personal feelings come out through a what starts as a kayfabe message exchange, things like that. But no, as a whole, collectively, I think it's more positive than negative.
Gotcha. I'm gonna try another speed round name on you. You may or may not be familiar. Gabe Kidd.
I know who he is. I know Kenny Omega just worked him at Wrestle Kingdom. That's
Mm-hmm.
the first time, and I didn't see the full match. I just saw a highlight video of it. Just to let the people in watching know, like we had discussed before we went live, I don't keep up with as much wrestling current day as I should. But from what I saw, he looked great.
Yeah. I wasn't terribly familiar with him either, but I saw. I ended up actually getting to see the whole match with him and Kenny, and I'm a Gabe Kidd fan now. I mean that guy has a bright future ahead of him. I mean he was right in there with Kenny, and I mean granted it was Kenny's comeback match, but man, I mean both of those guys put on one hell of a match.
Yeah, I would like to
So
sit down and watch the full at some point.
yeah, it's worth your time. It really um, let you see that Kenny is really finally back in form of being the best bout machine or whatever you want to call him. I mean, he was definitely at the top of his game. So knowing everything that you know at this point in life, if you could give any advice to your younger self, what would it be?
And this was my third most anticipated question, and that's really simple. Drop the ego. Drop the ego, 100%.
Yeah. And, that's good advice for anybody especially the young folks. I mean, I'm at the age I'm at right now. I have no ego. I have no pride. I mean, because there's just not a lot of point to it. But
Yeah,
when you're young, yeah, man, the ego can be an albatross and an anchor around your neck and drown you if you let it.
are you familiar with Jocko Willing?
Yes, I love
Okay.
Jocko.
So he has a book called Extreme Ownership.
Yes,
And one of my previous bosses recommended it to me about a year and a half ago, and I read it, and that was like life changing for me. And everything that I learned in that book or have learned in that book, I feel like you can apply that to anything in life.
yep. Uh, do you listen to his podcast?
Occasionally I have. I don't listen to it regularly, but I've definitely dabbled in it.
Yeah, he is quite a man. I'm a huge Jocko proponent. I think that guy, if more people would listen to him and take to heart what he has to offer, I think the world would be a better place.
Yeah, I agree.
So, do you have any pre-show traditions? Any things that you try to do consistently before you go through the curtain? And that may have changed over time for you as well, but um,
Uh, how candid could I be with this answer?
go for it.
Younger me, it was take as many shots of liquor and smoke as many blunts as I could. Uh, Older me, I do like to still have a drink or two before a match. I don't want to be necessarily intoxicated, but I like to just calm my nerves a little bit. I like to make sure that me and the person I'm, working with, that we're on the same page. We're comfortable with everything that we're going to do out there. Make sure that the booker is happy with the way the match is planned to go. Um, and then I definitely like to go see my wife in the crowd and give her a quick kiss, let her know I'm gonna be all right, and look forward to seeing her cheer me on when I go out there.
Gotcha. We've got a couple of comments. One from YouTube that I'm going to throw up on the screen here. The Reign of Wrestling says, "Nice title."
Love it. It's my favorite. I actually love this belt. When Chris showed me that this was going to be the title we were using, um, it's not a custom made belt, but at the same time, it's unique. I've never seen it.
And then Dick Mondale says, says, "What's up, champ? Dick Mondale approved."
Oh, everybody loves Dick. Dick Mondale's the man.
So let's see here. So something that we've done in all of these that's just been kind of fun is we've let the current guest pose a question for the next guest.
Hmm.
So my previous guest was a wrestler from here in the Atlanta area. Um, he goes by the name Coyote Sandstorm. And the question that he posed is, what is it about wrestling that grabs you? Is it the narrative, the moves, the characters? What is it that keeps you coming back?
I love this question. And I actually knew you were going to, so I knew this was part of the questions, and I intentionally did not watch your last interview because I didn't want to know what the question was in advance.
Oh, cool.
Um, but really thinking about that question, I feel like wrestling applies to like life. Like everything that goes on in wrestling, you can apply it to life in some way. So like Chris and I, we work together. He works
Hmm.
at the car wash with me, and just constantly we're using wrestling lingo. You know, hey, we're gonna rib this person, or somebody gets, hey, they just worked themselves into a shoot. Like, and it's just there's so many little things that you hear about that have taken place in wrestling and the backstage and just stories, and all of that just carries over into life.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. And since this is part of a series, do you have a question that you would like to pose to the next guest? And I can go ahead and tell you, my next guest this coming Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern. I've got a tag team from out of Denver, Colorado. Uh,
Okay,
the
Denver.
the the name of the tag team is JK Pop, and it's composed of Johnny Casanova and Caden Koyama, and they are the current Rocky Mountain Pro Tag Team Champions. And by the
Okay.
way, Rocky Mountain Pro, they have a weekly show on YouTube, and they are actually putting out some really good wrestling. So if you're ever bored, check out Rocky Mountain Pro on YouTube.
Yeah,
It's definitely some good stuff.
one of our guys who used to be down here with us lives up there in Denver. So I'm gonna have to talk to him about that. Maybe see if I can get him to go out there and work with them. But my question would be, because this is something I'm kind of facing myself here in this latter half of my career, but I think this is a great perspective that I like to gain from anybody in the business is when do you know it's time to be done? And how do you make yourself okay with that?
Oh, that's a good question. How would you answer that?
I can't. So that's why I like to hear other people's perspectives. Because I've been done about 5 times over at this point, and I'll probably be done another 5 times over before I'm actually done.
Gotcha. Um, so we're getting toward the end of things now. So do you have any upcoming shows or anything at all that you'd like to give some hype to?
Yeah, definitely PWR, My Brutal Valentine on February 23rd at OB's in DeLand, Florida. Want to give a quick shout out to our sponsors at PWR, All Star Building Material, Complete Overall Construction, Waters Car Wash. We wouldn't be able to make it happen without them. And then I worked one show with Riot Pro Wrestling as well back in December. But I definitely am looking forward to working with them here in the future. I know they have a show coming up next Saturday, the 25th. I won't be at that one because I'm still kind of recovering my neck injury from this last show. But I only did like 5 matches last year, and that was my first year back after being on like a 6-year hiatus. So 2025, I'm looking to fill the calendar up and really get out there.
That's awesome. So how do your wife and family feel about you returning to wrestling?
So she actually likes it, and I tell her all the time, like, just let me know when you're sick of this. All right, like you don't got to go along with it if you're not into it. But she actually watched it herself as a kid. And she's only a couple years younger than me, so she's familiar with the heyday, the Monday Night Wars, Attitude Era, all that stuff as well. Her brother is also a huge fan of it, and he still watches it today. So she kind of loosely knows what's going on, but she enjoys seeing it. Obviously, she has concerns about me getting hurt, like anybody
Right.
would. My parents, on the other hand, they're not the biggest fan of it, but they actually came out and watched the last show, and they saw me get hurt, of course. But again, that's their big concern is just making sure that I'm safe.
Right. Right. It's funny. My wife is anything but a wrestling fan. And the thing that's been cool though is since I've started doing these live streams, she watches all of them, and she has told me now that she at least now understands why I'm a fan.
Mhm.
and I feel like that's progress.
Oh yeah.
I'm never asking her to be a fan, but at least now she understands kind of what the appeal is,
Oh yeah, definitely.
So,
Even if you're
but
not a fan of wrestling matches, there's a human familiarity and element with the personas and the characters and the backstage drama that goes on. If people are into celebrity gossip, wrestling gossip's 10 times more
oh,
exciting.
absolutely. Really, a lot of the backstage machinations that go on in the wrestling industry are actually more intriguing than a lot of the storylines.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Truth is stranger than fiction, and and some of the stuff that happens behind the scenes is just crazy. I mean,
Insane. Insane.
but But man, this has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you for your time. It's been a lot of fun to nerd out about wrestling with you, pick your brain a little bit, and um, Chris definitely gave me a good recommendation when he told me to reach out to you. So you've got a lot to be proud of, and I hope you are proud.
I appreciate that. Yeah, we've been talking for an hour and it doesn't even feel like it. So this was definitely a pleasure. I appreciate you having me on. Maybe we could do it again sometime.
Absolutely. I mean, definitely consider yourself part of the Throwdown family, and consider yourself as having a standing invitation to come back anytime you want. And like I said, as far as what we've got coming, actually this Sunday at 2 p.m. Eastern time, we're starting a weekly panel discussion show that we're calling the Wrestling Roundtable. And basically it's kind of a rotating panel of some indie wrestlers, some fans, and just other people that have a connection to the business, basically just getting together to sort of talk about what happened the previous week, talk about news in the industry, that kind of thing. So we've got that Sunday afternoon at 2 p.m. And then, like I said, Monday night at 7, we've got JK Pop, that tag team. And then on Tuesday, the 21st at 7, we've got episode 73. We've got a guy named Dante Darko, and he's another Atlanta-based guy, and he's a singles wrestler, but he also tags with a previous guest of mine, Neji Ichiban. They tag together as the Dark Passion Assassins here in Atlanta. And then on Wednesday, the 22nd at 7, I've got episode 74. I've got a guy named DJ Bruner, who's another Atlanta-based guy. He trains at a place up here called WWA4. He trains under a guy named AR Fox.
Oh yeah, I know AR Fox.
Yeah, yeah, and Fox is actually running a really good school up here. I've had a number of his guys on here, and they all carry themselves very well. They represent the school very well, and I'm trying one of these days to actually get Fox on as a guest. I would love to pick his brain, but he's a busy dude, so
Well,
it's
you're getting close to episode 100, so maybe that's your guest 100 right there.
who knows? Who knows? But man, yeah, this thing is definitely rolling and kind of taking on a life of its own. I got started doing this back in last January, actually on the music side of things. I was actually doing live stream chats with unsigned bands, and I sort of expanded the scope in July to wrestling. And then I found it was actually easier to get wrestling bookings than it was the music. So I shifted the focus over. And so, I mean, since July, I've done now, 71 of these. So it's rolling right along. But like I said, man, thank you for your time. And for those of you that have been watching this live, thank you. For those of you that'll be seeing this on replays and clips on the web, thank you for that. Everybody be safe. Have a great night. Be good to each other. And we'll be back Sunday afternoon and then next week. And in the meantime, love each other, be good to each other, and keep throwing down.